Well, thank you all for joining us again for our lunchtime chats with Tlingit Haida. My name is Richard Peterson. My Tlingit name is Gunalchéesh, and I serve as the president of Tlingit Haida. Today, I'm really excited to have SEARHC's Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President, Dr. Elliot Brule, join us. Dr. Brule is going to, be sharing with us today a special presentation on the coronavirus vaccine and answer any questions you may have. His presentation will address how the vaccine works, how effective it is, the side effects, and safety of it. Dr. Brule, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our guests?
Thank you, Richard. It's an honor to be here. My name is Dr. Elliot Brule. I'm a family physician. I've practiced medicine in Southeast Alaska for over 25 years. My Tlingit name is Gunalchéesh. I hope that you will forgive me for my struggles with introducing myself in a traditional manner. Gunalchéesh yuhat duasal, yech na ayahat, luk nahari hatsiti, glate kalyadi ayahat, shika kwan ayahat. So I'm a member of the Lunchtime Coho clan here in Sitka, and my father is from the state of Minnesota. I'm going to talk today about a really wonderful development that we're experiencing now, is the opportunity to begin inoculating people with vaccine. And so you can see there's Richard is sharing my my bio, and as you can see, I've worked primarily with SEARHC over the last 25 years, but also spent 5 years as assistant professor at the Mayo Clinic School of Medicine in Minnesota.
Great. Well, before you begin your presentation, Dr. Brule, I really want to take the opportunity to give our thanks and gratitude to SEARHC for partnering with us to ensure, our tribal citizens are receiving the accurate information on the coronavirus vaccine. There are so many false claims about the vaccines in the news and on social media right now. And I fear that misinformation risks undermining public health efforts, and it's important that our tribal citizens have the facts. We hope today that your presentation will help relieve any anxiety that folks might be having right now and allow people to make an informed decision. I've said very bluntly from Tlingit Haida, while I myself am very public that I'm going to take the vaccine because I feel like I've received the information, I've digested that. It's also a personal choice, and I don't want to bully anybody or make anybody feel bad because of their choice. But we do hope that, that you take today and hear the facts. And at the end, even if you have questions, we encourage you to offer your questions, and we'll try our best to answer those today. But again, also, you have a relationship with your healthcare provider, and I encourage everybody to, make that appointment. Go talk to your healthcare provider and make the best decision for you, your family. And I think part of that decision is if you live in a multi-generational home, or if you deal with your elders or your children, that you're making a decision that's not just best for you, but for those that you love and that are around you. So Dr. Brule, if you're ready, please feel free to begin your presentation.
Okay, well, here's the most difficult part of it. Let me see if I can share it. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
All right, good. There we go. All right. As Mr. Peterson said, feel free to ask questions. I think what I would like to do, if it's okay with you, Richard, is that I'll go ahead and move through the presentation. It should take me about 15 or 20 minutes. And then at the end of that, you know, I'll be happy to answer as many questions as possible. And the only bad question is the question that isn't asked. So feel free to ask any question of any type, and I'll do my best to answer it.
Great.
So right now we are finally able to offer a vaccine for the coronavirus. And I think it's important for us in this presentation to just talk a little bit about what is the purpose of a vaccine. I'll spend some time talking about how does it work, the mechanics of its function, how effective is it. I'll talk about side effects. I'll talk about safety. I think it's helpful, given all the questions that people have, for me to spend a little time going into the details of how it was developed and how it was developed so fast, so quickly. How did that happen? And then I will share with you my understanding from, you know, my leadership position, what I'm aware of regarding the rollout of the vaccine into our communities in Southeast Alaska. I think that seems to be something that is evolving, but I'll give you, you know, my very best understanding based on what we know today. So it seems obvious, but I think it's worth taking a moment just to talk a little bit about what is the whole purpose of the vaccine. And, you know, clearly our goals with these are to prevent illness, you know, and we have 2 vaccines for COVID-19 that are currently approved. And this, one of them is from Pfizer and one of them is from a company called Moderna. On the other hand, drugs treat an illness. So, you know, once a patient has already acquired an illness, you know, we have medications that we can use to treat them. With coronavirus, there are many drugs that have been trialed and are currently being trialed. You can see the first one here, remdesivir, has what's called an emergency use authorization from the Food and Drug Administration. It's been shown to be helpful for patients that are extremely sick, patients that are on a ventilator or life support, and it's not used for people that are only mildly ill. This next medication, it's very difficult to say, bamlanivimab. And what it is it also has an approval from the Food and Drug Administration, and it's also an investigational drug. But it has been shown to be helpful for people who have mild illness but are at high risk for developing severe illness. So, for example, if I was a patient and I had severe lung disease, like maybe emphysema, and I became ill with COVID-19, this would be a medication that I could receive before I was hospitalized, while, you know, maybe right after I was diagnosed, because I have emphysema, I'm at high risk, and this medicine is a little difficult to give. We give it by IV. We do have it here in Southeast. We have been giving some doses of it, and it is it's an antibody to the COVID-19 drug, basically, and it allows, it assists your body to fight the infection. And I think some of you may have heard that President Trump received some medications when he contracted coronavirus, and this is one of them. There's dexamethasone, which is a steroid. It doesn't require any special authorization from the FDA because it's already a medicine that's part of our armamentarium. And it is proven to be somewhat effective for COVID-19, again, for people that are seriously ill. A lot of you might have heard of this drug, hydroxychloroquine. It received a lot of press back in the early summer and spring. So in May and June, people thought that this might be something that would help to treat COVID-19, and people went out and bought lots of tonic water and all sorts of other things. It did have an emergency use authorization for a little while, But then the data that the FDA continues to collect showed that it wasn't effective and it's no longer authorized for use. So really at this time, we really only have 3 medicines and none of them are terribly effective. And so vaccines are our largest hope for COVID-19 because of their ability to prevent you from getting the drug or getting the illness in the first place. So the coronavirus, this is an artist's view of the coronavirus, but this is how it looks when you look at it under an electron microscope. It's extremely small. And it's just very, very similar to the cold virus. It's related to the common cold virus, and it's spread by a respiratory route. That's why we wear masks, to help prevent spreading it. The important thing for understanding the vaccine is this little blue bump on the surface, which we call the spike protein. So it's a special protein that sits on the surface of the virus and allows the virus to attach to the cells in your body. So if someone coughed on me and I inhaled this virus, at a microscopic level, the virus that went into my lungs would adhere to the cells in my lungs using this little blue protein. So how does the vaccine work? The vaccine works using something called messenger RNA, which is a microscopic set of instructions. And those, when those are injected into the muscle cells in your arm, those muscle cells then actually manufacture copies of that spike protein. And here in this picture, it's a yellow color. In the one I showed you previously, it was blue. But that spike protein then gets manufactured. And then what happens is that your body learns how to recognize and attack that spike protein. And that is then, once your body has learned how to recognize that spike protein, and you get 2 doses of the vaccine spread out, about 3 weeks apart, so that your body really learns what that looks like, then if the virus actually comes into your body is able to attack it because it's already seen what that spike protein looks like. So you're now immune to the virus. So I apologize that this is a little bit blurry, but this is the best copy of this diagram that I was able to obtain this week. So we talk about how effective is this? Well, once you've had 2 doses of the vaccine, it's about 95% effective in preventing symptomatic disease. And what that means is that it prevents hospitalization and it prevents death. So this graph shows time going out here on the bottom level. And then as you go up on this direction is the number of people catching coronavirus. So you take 2 groups. One group got, this is during the development of the vaccine, one group got placebo. So basically they got just saline water put in their arm. They didn't know it, the doctors didn't know it. That's part of the way that the study was developed so that we could see how effective the vaccine was. And you can see, given the way things are these days, that they continued to get, as time went on, they continued to get the coronavirus. Now here in blue, what the blue line represents is people who actually got the vaccine. And you can see that it's a flat line. It's virtually flat. So that what that represents is the fact that as time goes on, none of those people were getting the coronavirus. So the red line is people who got a sham, they got a placebo. They got a dose of saline in their arm that did nothing for them. And they continued to contract the coronavirus. And then the blue line is the people who got the vaccine, and you can see they didn't. So what this means is that if you give this vaccine to 100 people, that for 94 to 95% of those people, they're never going to get sick. And the other thing that came out of the studies was that for those who did get sick, their illness was extremely mild. Now, effectiveness against asymptomatic disease is currently unknown, and that level of understanding we don't have that. I think we will have that over the course of the next several months as we continue to collect data on the vaccine, which is ongoing. So the side effects, a sore arm, 24 to 36 hours is the most common side effect. I experienced that when I got the vaccine a little more than a week ago. Headache and fever in the phase 3 trials, less than 5% of people had headache and fever, but there were some people who did. Fatigue is a little more common and mild. Some muscle pain and joint aches are very uncommon. There are not a lot of people who had those symptoms, less than 3%. Now, we've heard an awful lot about anaphylactic reactions, which is a very, very severe, life-threatening kind of reaction to a vaccine or to any drug. And in medicine, we see these kinds of reactions to medicines that you would consider very common. In the course of my career, I have treated people who have had anaphylaxis after getting Motrin. I've seen anaphylaxis from people getting other very common medications, lisinopril, antibiotics. So this can happen with any medicine that we give to people or any vaccine. Generally, for vaccines, we see anaphylaxis is a reaction that's seen about 1 in a million doses. To date, we've had 3 episodes of anaphylaxis. There have been other people who've had some milder reactions, but 3 episodes of anaphylaxis worldwide. Now, we happen to see one of those 3 in Juneau last week, which I know is a source of concern for people. However, I think it needs to be placed into perspective. At this point, I understand there's been about 2.3 million doses given around the world of the Pfizer vaccine as of earlier this week. And so for us to have seen 3 episodes of anaphylaxis actually does not surprise me too much. With regards to safety, this is, by the way, this is a picture of me getting my shot. With regards to safety, this is not a live virus vaccine. You cannot catch COVID-19 from the vaccine. None of the genetic material that is inside the virus is a part of this vaccine. The vaccine enters the cells, as I mentioned earlier, to create this production of the spike protein. So then what happens to those instructions afterwards? Your body naturally degrades those. It does not remain in your body. The degradation of RNA, messenger RNA, which is the type of instructions that are in the vaccine, is something that's going on in your body right now as we speak. It's a normal part of the biologic process of all of our cells. It does not linger long term. And that messenger RNA does not enter the nucleus of the cell and cannot become part of your DNA or alter the DNA of your cell. So there's not an enzyme that exists in our cells that converts RNA into DNA. It's not a part of cellular biology. So one of the things that people, I think one of the most common questions I've gotten from our medical staff as well as from members of the public in the last few weeks is, how could this possibly be developed in such a short amount of time? Well, there's a lot of good reasons for it, and it's a wonderful thing that this has happened. And people have called it a miracle. In reality, it's not a miracle. It's a result of a lot of hard work. So the previous work that was done on the respiratory virus pandemic that occurred 7 years ago, you might not remember this, but those of us that are in medicine, we remember it. This was an equally frightening event. It was caused by a virus called SARS-CoV-1, which the current virus that's causing COVID-19 is called SARS-CoV-2. So it is a very, very closely related virus. And so this virus began what appeared to be a pandemic about 7 years ago. And all of the large biomedical and drug companies began working at a very, very rapid pace at trying to develop a vaccine for SARS-CoV-1. And then that pandemic died. And all of that work existed. And so the development of this vaccine is built on top of the work that was done 7 years ago, because the two viruses are so very closely related. International scientific cooperation. So in spite of everything you hear about the politics of medicine between countries, the reality is that scientists cooperate. And in this instance, what happened was that when this broke out in China, the Chinese scientists sequenced the genome, or the DNA of the virus. They sequenced it very, very rapidly, and they sent that research out to everybody on the planet. So researchers in Europe and researchers in North America had that information back in March. And that meant that the most difficult part of the vaccine development was already in people's hands early in the year. The other thing is that as time marches on, the medical science related to genetics and immunology continues to advance, and things that we're able to do now, we weren't able to do even 2 years ago. And this vaccine represents really the milestone accomplishments that we've had in medical science in the last 10 years, which this effort would never have been possible even 3 years ago. So that we're blessed by that fact. Government support. So there was a very, very enlightened move by our government to create what's called Operation Warp Speed. And what they did was that they came to the drug companies and the biomedical companies and they said, look, we know back when we did SARS-CoV-1 7 years ago that you got left holding the bag. Basically, they did millions and millions of dollars of research, and then they never received any compensation for that. They never developed a vaccine because the pandemic died. And so at the beginning of this, the people in those industries were kind of like, listen, we're not going to go down that road again. And so the federal government said, look, you folks work on this. You work on it as fast as you can. We promise you, number one, we will pay you for your work. And number two, we promise you when it's all said and done that we will buy the vaccine. And so that stimulated the marketplace to drive forward as fast as they could. And if they hadn't done that, this would have never happened. And then the last thing that's going on is, you saw earlier I was talking about an EUA, Emergency Use Authorization. So the Food and Drug Administration now has this Emergency Use Authorization. And again, before that existed, this would have never been able to happen. What does that mean? Well, back in the early 2000s and the late 90s, there was the AIDS epidemic. And there were thousands and thousands of patients with AIDS who were dying. And there were drug companies that were developing medications that could address the AIDS virus, but the federal government the FDA took so long to approve those medicines that people were dying, when there were medicines that were very promising that were still going through the FDA process. And so there was a tremendous protest about this, and that the FDA had to have a way to take promising medicines that were available for serious diseases that were killing people and get them out and get them used before they go through the entire process. So that's where the emergency use authorization came from. And just so you know, every single COVID-19 test that is done in the United States is currently done under an emergency use authorization. None of those tests have ever been fully approved, and it's going to take, another several years for that to happen. But again, because of the pandemic, there was a need to get things out the door a little bit earlier. And the same thing is with the vaccines. So all of the work that proves that they're safe has been done, But some of the issues have not been fully resolved. For example, the issue of asymptomatic infection and how effective it is that I was just talking about earlier. So in a normal process of vaccine development, there's what's called the exploratory and preclinical stages. And that was what I was talking about with the Chinese, with them providing us with the genome of the virus. Then there's clinical development. Then there's regulatory review and approval, manufacturing, and quality control. And what's happened here is that all 5 of these steps have been done in an overlapping fashion, but each step has been completed in a normal way. And that's allowed things to happen a lot more quickly. So the most important part of this is the clinical stage. And this is where the vaccine has been developed and where it's being tested on human beings. So stage 1, there are small groups of healthy volunteers. So nobody who has any health conditions would be in this group. Be young, healthy people. And they volunteer. And what this looks at is the safety of the vaccine, whether it causes dangerous side effects. And it also looks at the immune response, whether or not the vaccine creates the reaction from your immunity that is desired. Then there's stage 2 trials, which are larger groups. These are groups of hundreds of people, again, healthy volunteers, but they're healthy volunteers in the vaccine target group. So who is this vaccine target group? It's people age 16 to 100. So stage 2 trials would include people in all of those ages. So whether it was you're 80 or 90 or 60 or 40, but all of those people would be healthy. And it would look at primarily safety of the vaccine. And then the last group is stage 3 trial. And these are very large groups. Thousands of healthy volunteers in the target group. And there are test and control groups. So you remember earlier I was talking about how there were people who received a placebo and then other people who received the vaccine. That was a stage 3 trial. And this is to examine how effective it is, as well as side effects and safety. So for the Pfizer vaccine, the phase 3 trial, which I have read very carefully, involved 43,000 people, 43,000 volunteers. And the Moderna vaccine involved 30,000. So collectively, these two vaccines, which are essentially identical in their mechanism, side effects, and effectiveness, over 70,000 people were involved in the stage 3 trials. So let's talk a little bit about how do we decide who receives this virus, or this vaccine, I'm sorry. And the Center for Disease Control has a group of experts that includes physicians, ethicists, and people from the public health service that distribute vaccines. And they have what's called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP. And they have produced a rubric for the country in terms of who should receive it first. And you may have heard that long-term care facility residents and healthcare personnel were in group 1A, the first group to receive the vaccine. And so in this column is those groups of people where we're trying to prevent people from getting sick. Morbidity and mortality basically means people getting sick or dying. So the people who get sick and die at the highest rates from COVID-19 are people in old folks' homes, long-term care facilities, nursing homes. And preservation of societal function, the healthcare system is sort of the bottom level of the foundation of what we're doing to try to fight the pandemic. So if we don't have nurses to work in the ICU, no one's going to get taken care of. So that is the first group that's received the vaccine. That's actually a fairly small group of people. The next group is people that are over age 75, and then frontline essential workers. These would be people who have a high likelihood of contracting COVID-19 and without whom society can't function very well. So an example of that would be somebody who works to make sure that we have food, or somebody who works to make sure that our children can go to school. And then 1C is people with high-risk medical conditions and people age 65 to 74, and then other essential workers. So those are the recommendations of that committee. And then how does that roll out? We're looking at, in the country, about 24 million people in this group of long-term care residents, healthcare personnel, and EMS and first responders. About 49 million in the group of people, basically our elders, people age 75 and above. And then at SEARHC, we're also including in this group our medically highly vulnerable people. So we want to make sure that in our vaccination efforts that we prioritize people who are age 75 and above, and that we prioritize people who are medically highly vulnerable. And here in Alaska, I participate on the Alaska Vaccine Allocation Recommendation Committee. And I've been recommending very, very strongly that we also have a rural priority. We have a lot of small villages in Western Alaska that don't have any water service or utility service, who are really terrifically vulnerable, and that we have to prioritize that, as well as our members of our culture that live in small communities in Southeast as well. So we're working to do that. And then we will eventually get to other essential workers and people age 16 to 74 with high-risk medical conditions. And then ultimately, the last group will be all people 16 and older that aren't previously vaccinated. So this is another question that I've been getting, and it does take several weeks to build immunity after you receive the first shot. Virus spread if a person is infected just prior to being vaccinated or just after is possible for sure. And we are recommending that everyone continue to wear a mask, wash their hands, and socially distance after vaccination, because of the fact that it's going to take us at least 6 months, and I think more realistically 9 months, for us to really vaccinate enough people to completely stop the spread of the virus in our society. So that is my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions, Richard.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bruhl. That was a really great presentation. We really have been inundated with questions, as you might imagine. So we'll try to get through those. And if we actually have to go over time, I think Dr. Bruhl is willing to be here a little longer.
Yes.
Try to get to them all. So I'll go ahead and get started. From Diane Carrier, how and where do I go for the vaccine?
Well, it will depend on where you live. And if you are living in Juneau, we will be providing the vaccine at the SEARHC clinic, and we are going to be generating a opportunity through the media for people in different areas of these sequence to get signed up. Right now, what we're focusing on is our elders over age 80 and over age 75, and we're in the process of reaching out to them and contacting them and trying to set up a schedule for them. The other group that we'll be reaching out to in the next week in all of our communities is those that are extremely medically vulnerable. And so who are those people? Those are people with severe lung disease, severe heart disease, severe kidney disease, Those are people who have been recipients of transplant or solid organ transplants. Those are people who are in the midst of chemotherapy, have serious cancer. And then some people who have multiple chronic medical problems. So people who have more than 3 serious medical problems. For example, if you had diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease. That would be an example of somebody who has 3 serious medical problems. And then people with morbid obesity, so a BMI of greater than 40. So those are the people that we're going to try to get in this early stages of vaccine. I don't think we've not been allocated enough vaccine to get through all of those people in all of our communities. But as we get more vaccines sent during January, that is our goal, is to get through those groups.
Great. So a question from Jane Johnson. If you had the virus, is the vaccine needed?
It's a great question. It's not entirely clear. The experts say that it would be best to get it. From a practical standpoint, we don't want you to get it for at least 90 days after you had the virus, because we think that your immunity, at least during the first 90 days following your having had the virus itself, should be protective. It's not clear, from a medical science point of view, it's not clear how strong that immunity will be after 90 days. So the experts in medicine, Dr. Fauci and others, are recommending that people who've had the virus previously should get vaccinated, but they should wait for 90 days.
Okay. Veronica Jean Redifer. My mother recently had the vaccination for COVID over the weekend, became positive for influenza. She is 83 years old and I'm concerned. So I'm guessing that she's asking if there's a connection between the two.
Yeah. No, there's not a connection between the COVID vaccine and influenza, but certainly we want people to get vaccinated for influenza, people in your mother's age group, people in their 80s, everybody who is older than 6 months should be vaccinated for influenza. And you do need to separate your influenza vaccine from the COVID-19 vaccine, I believe, by a week. I might be wrong, it might be 2 weeks. So I apologize that I don't have that at the tip of my tongue.
Thanks. From Roald Helgeson. Dr. Brule, many people are following the reactions some staff at Bartlett had to the vaccine. This obviously makes people nervous. Can you comment on the vaccine potential reactions and if we should get a vaccine?
Absolutely, Roald, you should get vaccinated. When the time comes that you are in your portion of the sequence of the rollout of the vaccine, I want you to get vaccinated. I got vaccinated. My wife, who is a nurse, got vaccinated, and I strongly encourage you to do so. So the side effects I experienced were a sore arm, maybe a little fatigue the first day, and that is really the reaction that almost everybody has. We've had a very large acceptance of the vaccine by our staff, upwards of 65 or 70%. And really, everyone is doing very well with it. Now, is it possible to have a more serious reaction? Yes. We've had a few people who've had a headache, a few people who've had a fever, and a couple people who've missed a single day of work, but then felt just fine after that. We have the same kinds of side effects from the flu vaccine. We have the same kinds of side effects also we see from the tetanus vaccine. So, what is it that's creating those symptoms? It's not a reaction to the drug. What it is it's your immune system responding to the vaccine and doing what it's supposed to do. So that's really what's causing that. Now, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking, There have been several cases of anaphylaxis that have occurred on the planet. And, you know, I will tell you that that is something that we see in clinical medicine every day, every week. And of course, the national media is not aware of it, and you're not aware of it, but we take care of people with these kinds of serious allergic reactions on a regular basis. We know how to recognize it. We know how to treat it. And I think it's a credit to the professionalism of the physician staff at Bartlett and also in the National Health Service over in Britain, that when these reactions occurred, they were able to treat them successfully, and those people are just fine.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that people have allergic reactions all the time. I actually have severe allergic reactions. I'm actually allergic to Devil's Club, penicillin, Levaquin, sulfas. So I have a real heck of a time actually getting antibiotics. And, you know, I carry around an EpiPen because of it, but I don't want to downplay anaphylaxis is very serious, but it's also fairly common but rare. Is that a fair statement?
Well, when you think about how many medicines we prescribe in this country, you know, millions and millions
Right.
and millions of doses, a fairly rare complication, as in kind of, you know, 1 in a million or 1 in several 100,000, is the level of reaction that you see like that. And yet, you know, because that's what we do in medicine, we provide medications to our patients. That's an awful lot of what we do. It is something that we do see. And in my years as a physician, serving in the hospital here at Mount Edgecombe Medical Center, you know, I've cared for many patients with these kinds of reactions, and it's frightening, but fortunately we have good treatments available for it. And anywhere where we're giving the vaccine, we do have those medicines available.
Yeah, I mean, because I have these allergic reactions doesn't mean I stop going to the hospital for treatment. You
That's
know,
right.
in fact, I feel a lot better going because, you know, that you have such competent reactions to it to be able to take care of it. So, from Marvin Willard, do you take this vaccine every year or is it a one-time thing?
Marvin, what a fantastic question. I do not know. We don't know the answer to that. I think our perception is that this will be a one-time thing. Now, you do need to take 2 doses of the vaccine about 3 weeks apart for it to be fully effective. And will it continue to be effective 3 years from now? I do not have an answer for you, and I don't think anybody does, because you know, we haven't gone down that road far enough. You know, and this is exactly the kind of question that might be answered in the normal development of the vaccine, you know, if without the emergency use authorization. So that's exactly the kind of question that we would know if we were developing this vaccine, say, in a time when there wasn't a pandemic. You know, the stage 3 trials would go on for years, and we would know the answer to that question. But of course, it's not possible for us to know that now. One thing that's kind of cool is that when you get the vaccine, you're going to have a chance, if you have a smartphone, you're going to have a chance to scan a QR code that will hook you up to the FDA and the CDC and allow you to report if you have symptoms to them. And if any of those symptoms are severe, they're going to contact you, and they'll contact your doctor and investigate. Why is it? I would encourage, you don't have to do that, it's not required, but I strongly encourage that everybody who gets the vaccine go ahead and do that, because what you're doing is you're helping our society and science to be able to really understand the questions, just exactly like Marvin was asking. Excellent question.
So, Dr. Brule, reviewing the questions, I'm seeing one common question pop up in the news. We've heard about a mutating strain of the COVID. And so people are asking, Patty Natkong, John Hawkins, both asked, are the vaccines going to be effective on the mutating COVID-19 virus?
Yes, everything we understand right now is that the answer to that is yes. So this was something that's been looked at by the medical scientists in both Great Britain and in the United States. And Dr. Fauci from the CDC came out and said, everything that we understand at this point indicates that the changes in that virus that make it more communicable do not affect the effectiveness of the current vaccines.
Great.
I think Richard, can I say one other thing about mutations of viruses?
Sure, please.
So genetic mutations of viruses are not extraordinary. As a matter of fact, they're normal. That is why we have to have a flu vaccine every year. I wish we didn't, but the reality is that the flu virus manages to change continuously every year. And so what happens is that medical scientists actually look at the flu virus that's in pigs, in swine, in China every summer, and that helps them to understand what will be the mutations next year and design the vaccine that we get the following year. It's kind of crazy. I don't know exactly how that can be possible, but that's how it works. And but viruses do mutate, and the reason they do is that they're replicated millions and millions of times in the body of every person who gets ill. And so as a result, there's billions of copies of the virus being replicated, and so there are mutations. There's nothing we can do to prevent that.
Yeah, it's funny. These viruses really aren't new, but I think because of this level of pandemic, I think we're becoming more knowledgeable than ever before. And so I'm really, it sounds weird to say this, excited about this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right, and I think one thing that people ask themselves would be, why now? How does this happen? It's part of our modern world. We have an interconnected world. I'm sitting here with with a phone that was built in China, and with drinking a drink that maybe was bottled in Florida. And goods are moving, people are moving, and so part of what can happen with that is that we have to deal with the side effect of that.
We have from Krista Lee Perala. You might have already kind of covered this, but I'm wondering what the tiers of vaccine inoculations will be. So far, I know healthcare workers, first responders, etc., have been able to get the vaccine. I'm wondering, when will our communities and community members that are not healthcare workers be getting a chance to get the vaccine? I think you covered that pretty well.
Yeah, I'll just say a few more words about it. The sequencing of the vaccine into the communities is going to prioritize elders and in our work. So we are committed. I'll just say a few things about SEARHC. I can't say what's going to happen in Anchorage. I can't say what's going to happen in Seattle, and I can't say what's going to happen in Ketchikan, but I can say what's going to happen in our communities. Mm-hmm. So we are committed to every patient in every one of our communities. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's quite easy for the vaccine to land in Juneau and Sitka, but we have gone to tremendous lengths to push that vaccine out into our other communities. So, last week, I was personally flying vaccine down to Prince of Wales. I was personally flying vaccine out to Cake. And other members of my staff that were personally escorting vaccine into Angoon, up Lynn Canal to Haines and Klukwan, and over to Hoonah. And we will continue to push vaccine into all of our communities so that we march forward together. So we're not going to just vaccinate Juneau and Sitka and then someday get to the villages. And we're not going to just vaccinate the villages and leave out Sitka and Juneau. We, as the leader of the medical operations of our company, I am committed, you can ask the people who work for me, they'll tell you, I am committed to one practice. We have one practice, and we will not have winners and losers, or people who are marginalized because they live in the smaller community. We have to build our practice around our values and be a value-driven organization. So that means respect and honoring cultural traditions. It means a commitment to service. It means a commitment to compassion, and quite importantly, professionalism. So those values demand that we do it the way we're doing it. And that means we're not just taking care of the big cities, and we're not just taking care of the small communities. My intention is that we will march our way through these sequences in all of our communities together. So, and what is up next? What is up next is that we're going to take care of the elders, because number one, they're precious. Number two, they are the most vulnerable members of our society in terms of contracting the disease. And they have paid the highest price in terms of mortality, death, and disease. And so it's ethically the right thing to do, it's medically the right thing to do, and it's culturally the right thing to do. And then as we move from there, we'll move to people who have severe medical diseases, and then we'll also then move to people who are critical frontline workers. The people who work in your grocery store, the people who make sure that your water is running, and those types of things. So I hope that helps to answer sort of not only the substance of the question, but also the philosophy that SEARHC is taking.
It really does. And I'm a no BS guy. If I have a problem with something, I'm going to tell you. And if I like it, I'm going to tell you. And I've been watching very closely, and I want to commend you for that, because I've been watching and I see the deployment to our villages equally. And I think that's really reflected of what you just said. Now, I personally, coming from the village, really appreciate that. And I appreciate that you have such a approach that the values are incorporated. I've seen in the lower 48 tribes actually have prioritized folks who are the language learners and things like that. And I really value that. And I think that's kind of fits that approach here is, these are our precious people, and we have an obligation. And I think that's reflected. I just want to reflect in my appreciation for that.
Well, thank you, Richard. And there's going to be points in time as we go forward with this when we won't get it right, or where, there will be disappointment. And while I can't promise you that we'll get it perfect, I can promise you that that I will listen, and that my CEO, Mr. Clement, will listen, and we will work to get it right. But really, I think for me, as the medical leader for our group, we have to do what is medically right, and we have to live up to our values, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'm jealous I wasn't first in line, but I also appreciate who has been. So, hey, nobody's going to be satisfied 100%, but until it's all done.
You're right.
We just got to have patience and hold each other up. That's our value, right? And so that's what we're doing. So I'm going to get back into the questions, because we do have a lot.
Yes.
Gina Navarro, sorry if this was asked, is the vaccine effective on transmission as well as symptoms?
Well, isn't that a great question? Really a brilliant question. We don't have data on that. So I can't tell you. And this, again, I think reflects the fact that this is an emergency use authorization. What we know is that people who receive the vaccine don't get sick and they don't die. So and we know the vaccine is safe. So, that is really, when you want to get down to brass tacks, that's really the level that we're at with development. Now, it makes perfect medical sense that if I'm protected against getting sick, I'm also going to be protected against transmitting the virus if I'm exposed to it. But that's going to be, it's going to take us several months to kind of get some clarity around those things. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's important for us to, to participate in the CDC, because in a sense, as a country, there is an element of us needing to continue to learn about this. So I think that if we're meeting if we do another meeting like this in a few months, I hope that I'll be able to answer that.
Well, I'm going to say unequivocally that the door is open to another meeting doing this again.
Yeah, we'll do it.
This has been terrific information. Sarah Escobar asked, my understanding is you get a 2-series shot. What is the difference between the 2 shots?
No difference. It's identical. It's the different, the purpose of the second shot is to allow your immune system to go through another round of the same activity that happened with the first shot. You might remember that when I talked about how is the content of the vaccine, how is it processed by your body? So there's actually 9 things that are in the vaccine. So in addition to sterile water, there is a little bit of sugar, there's a little bit of salt, and those are in the vaccine so that when it goes into your body, it's the same pH, it's the same chemistry as the fluids that are in your body. So that, and that's a normal thing that would be in a vaccine. And then the other 4 elements, one of the elements is the messenger RNA that I talked about in my talk. And then the other 3 elements are fat, lipids. And it's a kind of very, very special fat that encases that messenger RNA and protects it until it gets inside the cell and does, its job. Those are the only things that are in the vaccine. And like I said, your body's going to degrade the instructions, the messenger RNA, fairly quickly. I mean, over a period of days, it'll be gone. So your body has a chance to react and create this immune reaction that will protect you. And what they found is that when they gave it to you twice, the second time your immune system reacts a little more vigorously. People do have a few more side effects the second shot, but it produces a much stronger immunity.
Well, I got to tell you, Dr. Brule, as I'm scanning through some of the questions, we got some great questions coming.
They're excellent.
So Mary Johnson asked, will SEARHC be reaching out to the elders when it is their time to get the vaccine, or do we need to call and make the appointment?
Absolutely, we will. So if you're a SEARHC patient, we have already been working for the last few weeks to generate lists of our elders in each community, and our lists of medically vulnerable patients and our lists of extremely medically vulnerable patients so that we can reach out to them. But if you're over 80 and you haven't heard from us in the next few days, then I would call in the beginning of next week. We're going to try to be getting people over 75, people over 80 here in the next 10 days or so. Please understand, we're in the middle also of the Christmas holiday, and so that we're trying to give some vaccines to some of our 90-year-olds here today and tomorrow, and then we're trying to gear up in the next 2 days before the Christmas holiday so that we can give a lot more vaccines to elders next week. And so if you haven't heard from somebody, please do feel free to contact the clinic, but I would suggest you call our COVID hotline. That would probably be a little easier than on us, and on our staff than calling the clinic. But we should be reaching out to you.
Okay, maybe I'll just put a thing out to my staff right now that are monitoring this. Rayanne or Jody, can you put the COVID hotline into the Facebook Live comments? Okay, from Barbara Franks. With the reaction from the vaccine the nurses had, are the locations also stocked up with the proper treatment necessary?
Yes. Every place where we give the vaccine, we have epinephrine, we have Benadryl, we have Solumedrol available so that we can, if somebody does have a reaction, we're ready to deal with it. And the people who are giving these vaccines are all licensed medical clinicians. So, nurses, RNs.
Great. From Teresa Wilkie, if people are allergic to the flu shot, how will this be effective?
There's no reason to think that because you're allergic to the flu shot that you would be allergic to this. There's no known cross-reactivity. And if, so the question, let me broaden the question if that's okay. So if you have a history of severe allergic reactions that have required intervention in the form of epinephrine or something like that, I would definitely have a conversation with my doctor before getting the shot. Okay, it may be, and let them actually review what happened and look at what happened so that you can make a good informed decision. Because in some instances, we'll recommend that people don't, and in some we'll recommend that they do. But I in general, I recommend that people do. And another question that hasn't been asked, but I'll answer it because it's kind of along the lines of this one, which is who should get the shot. It has not been tested in pregnant women and women who are lactating. However, based on the mechanism of the vaccine, we do feel that it will be safe for those people. And the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which is the overhead group of all obstetricians in the country, has come out in the last 2 weeks and said that they have met with the scientists at the CDC and reviewed all the data, and they recommend that the vaccine not be withheld from pregnant women and women that are breastfeeding, and that they recommend that all people in those groups consider getting vaccinated, and if they have concerns, they should talk to their doctor. Now, I have a number of patients that I've spoken to in recent days who are pregnant or who are breastfeeding, and I have recommended that they get the shot.
There's actually several people asked that question, so thanks for answering. I think it weighs on a lot of people.
Yeah, it's understandable.
The next question comes from my biggest fan, my mom. I think you know her, Dr. Brule, Paula Peterson.
Yes.
She asked, living on Prince of Wales, it's winter, and I don't drive from Kisan to Kloak to the SEARHC clinic due to the road conditions. How can I get the vaccine if I can't get to the clinic?
Understand. Well, I think that we will need to be bringing it to you, is my answer. So maybe not directly to your home, but hopefully to your community. So, I know we have, now here I'm just speaking off the top of my head, Richard, but I believe we have 40 or 50 elders in Heidelberg. I believe we have probably twice that in Craig and twice that in Cluckwan. I'm sorry, in Kloak. So we will work with our clinic staff, and we will be working to bring these vaccination clinics on the road. So I don't think that it's going to be possible for us to give them in people's homes for a wide variety of reasons, but hopefully something much closer to where you live.
Well, Kisan does have a SEARHC clinic, so.
Yep, that's right.
Marvin Willard asks, how long do side effects last?
Let me just write this down on my little sheet here. Well, for most people, Marvin, usually they seem to be lasting for a day or less. So in my case, which was very typical, my arm was sore until the following day, and by the following evening, that was gone completely. Most people who have had problems with a little bit of fatigue or headache have found that has resolved after 24 to 36 hours. I'm not aware of anybody that we've vaccinated who has had symptoms lasting longer than 2 days. And that's consistent with the phase 3 trials, that the side effects are mild and usually resolve within 1 to 2 days.
From Cheryl Contreras, is it recommended that people that contracted the virus get the vaccine?
We did cover that. Yes, the answer is yes, but you should probably wait 90 days since the time that you were infected.
From Cynthia Flood, I was in COVID ward a few weeks ago. Should I wait?
Same answer.
Okay. From Dr. Ginny Cruz, I'm curious if we know when kids might be able to start getting the vaccine. I work with children and have children who will hopefully be going to school in the fall.
Yeah. I don't know. I do know that they have begun a phase 3 trial that involves children. I don't know when they will have sufficient data to be able to potentially authorize an emergency use for the vaccine for children. I'll tell you as a physician and as a scientist that it would be unlikely that there would be problems for children with this type of a vaccine. But of course, no one's going to authorize its use until we have data to demonstrate that. For the meantime, we will be prioritizing teachers and people who support education. So that means everybody who works in an educational environment. So that is on the list of priorities.
Good. From Mary Katas, does this mean 2 viruses related mean those of us who were exposed and treated for the first virus, chances lessen for the effects of SARS-2?
Oh, Mary, nice to hear of you. Hello. Great question. And I maybe just a little confusion from my talk. So let me explain that again. So we have COVID-19. There's just one virus that's a COVID-19 virus. But that virus had a cousin. And that virus, that cousin, it's no longer around. It's gone. That pandemic died out 7 years ago. So that virus is gone. But we studied that virus very intently 7 years ago. And the knowledge that we gained from studying that virus is the knowledge that we needed to be able to produce this vaccine, because they're closely related. So it's sort of like, if we were fighting an enemy 7 years ago, and then now we're fighting that enemy's brother, the things we learned from fighting that other enemy are helping us now to fight this one. So that it really, I think what it helps us to understand, how is it possible that we could have a vaccine that's effective and safe after only 10 or 12 months since this all started. And I think that's been a source of skepticism. And I think it's reasonable skepticism. I mean, people say, how the heck could that happen? And so I wanted to talk about that. And that was one of the things that allowed for that to happen.
Well, if it's one thing we understand, it's cousins, so good analogy. Marvin Willard again, is it possible that this virus will die?
Yeah, it is. And we sure hope it will. So when, not only is it possible, Marvin, but I pray fervently that it does, but there's no guarantee. So it's possible that it could potentially change into a type of virus that is continually evolving and that we can't get out in front of. But ideally what will happen is that if we vaccinate enough of a percentage of our population, here I'm talking not about Southeast Alaska, I'm not even talking about the United States, I'm talking about globally. If we manage to vaccinate a large enough percentage of the people on the planet, transmission of the virus will stop and it'll die.
Great. So from one of our vice presidents, Rob Sanderson Jr., will COVID lose strength? The virus does not want to kill their host.
Oh, great question. You know, that's really a good observation. Biologically, viruses that kill their host quickly are pretty easy for us to get rid of. So you remember the Ebola virus a few years ago? It was terribly frightening. I mean, it was frightening for us, for everybody. Horrible virus that caused people to, to start bleeding internally and die very quickly. I mean, if you caught the virus, usually within 36 hours, you would die. Well, it was a horrible thing, but the fact that it killed the host very quickly was the reason that it was also able to be stopped pretty quickly. Because if you were able to isolate anybody who had it in a short amount of time, you cut off transmission, and the problem with this virus that's made it so difficult is that if I'm infected with it today, I don't even show symptoms of the virus sometimes for 10 or 14 days after I'm exposed. It takes a long time for you to even know that you have it. And then there's this other whole group of people who have no symptoms but continue to spread it. So that's what's made this so very difficult.
Okay. From Veronica Dalton, should we hold off taking certain medication beforehand to get the best benefits of the vaccine?
Oh, Veronica, it's a great question, and hello to you and Huna. No, you shouldn't stop taking any of your regular medicines. You should take all of your medicines normally, and if whatever they might be. And here I'm speaking generally. I'm not speaking about Veronica, who I know. I'm just going to speak generally about patients. So I want to be clear about that. If you take medicine for your blood pressure or your heart, or if you have arthritis and you take immunosuppressive medicines, all of those things, you should continue to take those. So people, we have a lot of patients in Southeast Alaska who have rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and things of that nature. They're on medicines that suppress their immune system, but you should not, those people should not stop taking those medicines in anticipation of the vaccine. Great question.
Yeah. From Dr. Jenny Cruz again. What if you are a teacher and you aren't high risk, but your partner at home is high risk? Where do they fit in?
Great question. Well, your partner who's high risk will possibly have a vaccination earlier in the sequence than you might. However, teachers are going to end up being fairly high priority, and I think about the time we get done with our elders, teachers are going to be probably pretty close to the next in line. So I'm sure it'll work out that the two of you will both get vaccinated fairly soon. I'm sorry, I can't say exactly when, but I mean, those people who have high risk medical conditions and people who are frontline essential workers are people who are going to be getting vaccinated soon in the sequence. So in real terms, that means probably within the month.
Great. I just want to make a note. I'm skipping a lot of questions that are repetitive. And so I just want to say to our audience, if you feel like I didn't ask your question and that it was different than what already answered, let us know and we'll do that. I think Marvin Willard's going to get our most participatory award today. He asked, and I think this is a great question, is SEARHC the only organization that has received this vaccine for distribution?
No. It's a good question and a complex answer. I'm going to editorialize just a little bit, Richard. I'm going to just tell you how I feel. I don't honestly feel that the rollout of the vaccine has been as transparent and as well informed as it could be. And on the other hand, I'm not a glass half empty kind of person. So I'm very grateful for all of the vaccine we've received, and we have actually, as I see it, received a really a good amount to help us to really get started and get not only our healthcare providers, but get into our elders in our communities pretty quickly, a lot more quickly than a lot of people in this country. And I think one of the advantages we have is that we know our communities, we know our patients, and we understand our values. Now, beyond that, there are other vaccination efforts. So who and what are those that I'm aware of? And there's probably some I'm not. So, but the State Department of Health has contracted for vaccination of people in pioneer homes. I believe, and I may not be accurate, so forgive me if I'm not, but I believe they've contracted with CVS Pharmacy, CARS, and some other pharmacies to immunize everybody in that group, in the pioneer homes. So we haven't been involved with that. But of course we have patients in the pioneer homes, and so they might potentially, there might be crossover, but we're not worrying about that. People won't get vaccinated twice. The U.S. Postal Service is getting vaccinated differently. The Department of Defense has their own vaccination efforts, the Coast Guard. And in some communities, the EMS, fire, and public safety groups are being vaccinated through a program that's called the Pharmacy Partnership Program. And what that is it's a program that allows the federal government to push vaccine or medication out to pharmacies during times of natural disaster. And so you can imagine after a hurricane, maybe there needs to be vaccination for a virus or for another health problem. And so the pharmacies are all hooked into this around the country. And so I know in Sitka, for example, that the fire department and the EMS and so on got their vaccines through the local pharmacy. I don't know if Bartlett or the pharmacies in Juneau are vaccinating the EMS there. Now, we have agreed with the state that we will vaccinate EMS, fire, and public safety in the smaller communities that we care for. So it's a bit of a patchwork. Yeah.
That's great questions. Roald Helgeson again. Dr. Brule, in addition to a rural priority for vaccine, Alaska Native peoples represented a disproportionate number of COVID patients. We are also seeing this in other states with Indigenous peoples. Many of our people are frontline workers and live in multi-generational households. Should there be an Alaska Native and Native American priority for vaccination?
Yes. Yes, there should. There should, and I'm fighting for that at the state level in the venues where I'm involved. And I think that what I can say is that there's been receptiveness to that in those places. And I know Dr. Bob Anders from ANTHC has been, pushing for that. And so, yeah, I think it's, I did mention it earlier, and I think it's medically sound as well as being culturally sound.
Great. From the Charles family in Cloac,
can I say one other thing though, Richard, just before I finish that? Within our communities, we support all patients in our communities, and we do not intend to create separate lines for vaccine in our communities. I mean, if you live in Háw'aa or you live in any of Angoon or whatever, I mean, we take care of everybody in our communities, and we take care of them fairly. And we believe that that promotes the health of our beneficiaries as well. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Again, from the Charles Family Co-op, what is the minimum age for vaccination? My understanding from your presentation was 16. Will younger children be included in a later group? I think you answered that.
Hopefully. We don't have any authorization to vaccinate people under age 16 with the Pfizer, and actually it's under 18 with the Moderna vaccine. So right now, the vaccine that we have on Prince of Wales Island is the Moderna, and I think that that's only authorized for people 18 and above. I expect that these recommendations are going to change with time.
Okay.
But I don't have any, I don't know a date when that'll change.
Okay. From Renee Culp. Hello, Dr. Brule. This is great information and very helpful. However, given our long history with Indian Health Services, how do we know we can trust this process? And that's something in our community being asked a lot. The term guinea pig has actually been used a lot too.
Yep. Renee, thank you for asking that question. It's a question that doesn't have a good answer. The history of tragedy and colonial exploitation of Native people in Southeast Alaska and around the country, of course, is horrible, and I can't answer to it. But what I can tell you is that what I know about the vaccine is based on my education and my role and my knowledge, is that it has been fully vetted and using the best science that we have. I have received it myself because of the fact that I do take care of patients and I am a physician, but also because I want you and the other people that we care for to understand that I believe in this wholeheartedly, because of not because of my job, but because I feel that I've done my job, which is to research along with our other medical directors, Dr. Vastola, Dr. Przonka, and Dr. Bewley. We have spent hours reading the results, and we feel that this is, while it's not perfect, and while there are side effects and there's a risk of reaction, that it has been fully vetted. When you receive it, you are not a guinea pig. It's been authorized by, really, it's not a political group, it's a professional group. The people who evaluate vaccines at the CDC, they're the best that we have in science. And we're receiving the exact same vaccine that any other group would receive. And I am demanding a level of professionalism from our staff that I'll just tell you now, when I accepted this role as a chief medical officer a few years ago, I came back from the Mayo Clinic with a commitment to transform the level of quality of the care that we provide in this organization, because I care about the people in these communities and this place, where I raised my family. And my goal is that we move far, far away from the attitudes that I found when I first came here, back in the 90s, which was good enough is good enough. I want us to be, my leadership and the way that I'm pushing our staff is that we need to strive for excellence. And I intend that this organization is going to be recognized for excellence in the quality of care that we provide, and that we're going to be value driven in our decision making. So this is, that's all I can say about that.
If I can just add on, when I'm called up, I can promise that I'm going to take it and I'm going to share with people that I do. Unfortunately, I feel like the whole COVID, issue has been so politicized. But to me, I'm making an informed decision. I've talked to my healthcare provider. I have a very, people can complain about our services, and rightfully so at times. And I have, but I have a really good relationship with my provider, Dr. Kirk at SEARHC.
Oh, yeah.
And I sit down and we go over my health and where I'm doing. I think I've been very public about my journey. I've lost over 260 pounds in the last 4 years.
Wow.
So I'm public about that, not for any other reason, and not that I want to, but I feel as a leader, you have to. And so when I have the opportunity to take the vaccine, I'm going to share that, because I think people need to know that we're making informed decisions, and we're not asking anybody else to do what we won't do, and I think that's really important. And I think I want to thank you, Dr. Burrell, for your stance on that, because I think you have to model the leadership that we're asking for. And I think leadership should be right in front to get it, not in front of others, so to speak, but to demonstrate our faith and trust in it. And that we're making informed decisions and not politicized decisions, but based on what we know. So keep going. From the Charles family, Cloacagan. Also, is it possible that this vaccine will become a requirement for the schools and Head Starts, et cetera?
I suppose. Currently, because of the fact that it's being given under an emergency use authorization, there's no one who's requiring it anywhere. But I expect, as its safety proves out, as we vaccinate millions and millions of people, I expect that level of authorization will change. And here I'm talking about like next summer or something. It's possible that will change. And when that changes, once it's fully FDA approved, then it is possible for employers to require it under the regulations of the EEOC. So I don't know, I can't predict that future, but it's possible.
Right. We're getting closer to the end, so I'll try to finish these. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Burrell, for your time.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
You've been amazing. From Lisa Jackson, I hear folks with high allergies should not get this shot. As a person with severe allergy reactions, should I request a dose of allergy steroids?
Oh, that's a great question too. I think what you should do, Lisa, is you should talk to your physician. And you should express your concerns about the fact that you've had allergic reactions, and you and your doctor can make a well-informed decision about what's safe for you.
Great. Well, I think you already answered this, and again, it's my mother. Paula Peterson, can you have the staff bring the vaccine out to the smaller villages such as Kasan?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay. Gloria Darlene Eon, how long does the vaccine work? A year, a lifetime?
Yeah, and we don't know. We expect that it will. We expect that it will be long enough to help us shut down the pandemic, which would mean a year. I suspect it will last longer than that, but I don't know
that. From Martin Stepton Sr., the virus needs to be kept very cold. Do all of our communities have the proper equipment to accept larger amounts of the vaccine when they come?
Oh gosh, Richard, these are really wonderful questions. So operations, let's talk about it. So the answer is yes and no. So we saw this on the horizon back, about 3 or 4 months ago, and we've got some pretty astute people in our supply group. And they managed to get their hands on some of these ultra cold freezers well before the rest of the country sort of saw the writing on the wall. So we have received and installed ultra cold freezers in some of our largest clinic locations. So Juneau and Sitka, I believe Wrangell, Haines, and Klawock. I know for sure Juneau and Sitka. So the logistics of getting this out into the smaller communities is as follows. For the Pfizer vaccine, you have 5 days after it comes out of that ultra cold freezer to administer the vaccine, or it goes bad. So what we have done in order to ensure that none of it goes to waste, because it's a precious resource, is when we have moved that vaccine out into the smaller locations, for example, Cake and Angoon, we've taken small amounts, and less than 100 doses, because we know that we can line up that many people, get that vaccine given, and none of it will be wasted. Now, the Moderna vaccine, it has to stay frozen when it's shipped, but once it's thawed, you have 30 days.
Oh.
So we've got a lot more latitude with that. So you heard me a little earlier saying, well, if you're down in Prince of Wales, we're using Moderna vaccine down there. And there's a good reason for it, is that it's more resilient. And so it's just a little more difficult logistically, for example, to get vaccine out into smaller communities and locations. And so we want to use the Moderna in those spaces. So I hope that's helpful to understand, some of the things that we're doing. People wonder, well, why are they doing it that way, or what have you? These are sort of technical considerations. And so, a last technical consideration that's been just killing us, just really, really hard, is the weather. And, getting vaccine into the smaller communities, oh my gosh, one of our pharmacists and my wife, who's a nurse and a case manager for Háw'aa, they were trying to bring vaccine into Háw'aa last week in a float plane and got turned around because of the weather. And then we ended up sending it over there the next day by boat. And we also ended up having to send vaccine up Lynn Canal by boat, with 8-foot seas last week. I'm really proud of our staff. Lots of them have been working 12 and 14-hour days these last couple of weeks to make all of this happen, and taking personal risks to ensure that we get this distributed. But there's limits, and so one of them is the shelf life of the vaccine. And so, we can't thaw it until or unless we know we have people kind of lined up to receive it.
Great. So our last question for the day is from Gail DeBalas. Can non-tribal health beneficiaries receive the COVID vaccination at SEARHC clinics? I don't want to leave my native Hawaiian husband in limbo. He's received services at SEARHC before.
Yes. As I said, we it's a little bit more of a complicated question in Juneau, but in all of our other communities, we care for everybody in the community. If your husband is a non-beneficiary who receives services at Ethel Lund Medical Center, we will give him a vaccine for sure. When we get to the point in the sequence where it's appropriate.
Great. Well, again, I just want to thank you, Dr. Burrell. This has been an extremely informative discussion. Your presentation was great. I really got to give kudos out to our audience too. I think their questions were just super.
Excellent.
Yeah. Again, I want to just state that Tlingit Haida is not trying to tell people what to do. We want to provide the information in partnership and collaboration with SEARHC and others, so that we have the information to make the best informed decisions that we can for our personal health. And then, of course, as this is a virus pandemic, when we talk about our personal health, we have to think a little more globally, because it's a virus that can travel from person to person. It does change the dynamics just a bit, I think, and when we talk about our health. So again, we hope this has been informative. We'll definitely, as this progresses, we'll invite Dr. Burrell back I want to thank SEARHC, the leadership at SEARHC from the very beginning when Tlingit Haida, when this was all coming down, SEARHC stepped right up, provided information and meetings with our managers so that we could make decisions that were, you know, best for the health and well-being of not just our staff, but for our clients and our citizens. And, you know, I think that we're, you know, we see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we still have a little ways to go. And I hope that people still practice all the things that we're talking about, the physical distancing, the masks. Again, these are not political statements. Nobody's impeding anybody's freedom to ask to wear a mask. You know, it's not, we ask you to wear a seatbelt, and I don't see the cry out that we see. And, you know, and I don't mean to be flippant, and I certainly will never shame anybody for their choice. But, you know, I think our tribal value is to hold each other up. We also care very deeply about ourselves and others in our community. And so sometimes we have to make these sacrifices and we have to think beyond ourselves. And so that's kind of, I guess, maybe if there's a political statement, that's mine. And that's more just an opinion. And, you know, we try to lead with the best information that we can get. Dr. Brule, I don't know if you have any parting shots, but again, I just cannot thank you enough for such a fantastic presentation today. And
Well, you're so welcome, Richard, and I greatly appreciate our partnership with you and Tlingit Haida and with all of our tribal partners throughout Southeast Alaska. If anything, I ask everyone's forgiveness and ask for their patience as we work to try to do this. And I realize there's a gap between the information that may be available in your community and the information that I've provided today. And if that's the case, again, I apologize. We, in the last few weeks, have been pretty overwhelmed as a organization in terms of working to get this done and to do it right, to do it safely, to do it in a way that's morally and ethically appropriate. So that hasn't left a lot of spare time for, you know, PR work. And so I usually, and something like this, I think we would probably, I would hope, have a little more dialogue with communities. And that's one of the reasons I'm so thankful that you invited me. Because I think we were able to answer some real questions. God, they're just excellent questions. I hope that others who might watch this recording will learn from it. Richard, we'll work together to create other opportunities in the future if this is something that is of value to you.
absolutely, Gunalchéesh, Háw'aa for that. You brought up a good point that this is a recording. So we had quite a few people live today, a really good number. I encourage all of you who found this informative to share it. It's going to be on our Facebook in perpetuity, our YouTube channel. Encourage people to watch this. I think there is some really up-to-date and important information shared. We shared the SEARHC COVID hotline in our Facebook comments, so please go there. I seen some more questions come in that had already been answered, and so please go back and feel free to watch. I do want to close us out. Today's door prize winners, Joel Jackson got the hydro flask, and Marion Kita got one of our form line shirts. So please message us your contact information. We'll get those out to you right away. This will be our last lunchtime chat of the year, and we're going to be off for the next couple weeks with these. So just again, pay attention to our Facebook page, and we'll be back. I want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and yours. Again, please be safe, mask up, physical distance, and just be well. God bless. Thanks, Dr. Brule.
Yep, thank you.